My name is Mitchell, though most people call me James. I never expected that a basketball injury would completely change my life, leading me to find love in the most unexpected place, a hospital operating room. I'm a 28-year-old financial analyst working in Boston, and basketball has always been my escape from the stressful world of numbers and market forecasts. Every Thursday evening, I play with a group of friends at the local community center. That particular Thursday in October started like any other, but ended very differently. The game was intense, and in my competitive drive to block a shot, I landed awkwardly on my right knee. The pain was immediate and excruciating. My friends rushed to help, but I couldn't put any weight on my leg. Within an hour, I found myself in the emergency room of Massachusetts General Hospital. After initial examinations and MRI scans, the diagnosis wasn't good. A complete tear of my anterior cruciate ligament, ACL, requiring surgery. That's when I first met Dr. Christopher Bennett, the orthopedic surgeon who would change my life. He walked into the examination room with quiet confidence, his dark blue scrubs matching his deep blue eyes. At around 35, he had the perfect mix of youth and experience that immediately put me at ease. His brown hair was slightly messy, as if he'd been running his hands through it while studying patient files. "Mr. Mitchell," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm but gentle. "I'm Dr. Bennett, but please call me Chris. I've reviewed your scans and I'll be handling your surgery." As he explained the procedure, I found myself more focused on the way his lips moved than the medical terminology he was using. There was something captivating about his presence, professional yet warm, authoritative but kind. "Any questions?" he asked, snapping me back to reality. "How long until I can play basketball again?" I managed to ask, trying to ignore the flutter in my stomach. When he smiled, "With proper rehabilitation, usually 6 to 9 months," he replied. "But don't worry, we'll get you back on the court. I was quite the basketball player myself in college." That casual revelation led to a conversation about our favorite teams and players, completely forgetting about my injury for a few minutes. When a nurse reminded him about his next patient, he seemed almost reluctant to leave. "I'll see you next week for the pre-op consultation," he said, standing up. "Try to rest that knee and call if you have any concerns. My direct number is on the card." After he left, I stared at his business card for longer than necessary, my thumb tracing over the embossed letters of his name. I told myself it was normal to be drawn to someone so competent and caring. It didn't mean anything more. But that night, lying in bed with my elevated and ice-packed knee, I couldn't stop thinking about Dr. Christopher Bennett. His gentle hands during the examination, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how he'd listened intently to my worried questions. The week leading up to my pre-op consultation was filled with a mixture of anxiety about the surgery and anticipation about seeing Dr. Bennett again. I tried to convince myself that these feelings were inappropriate. He was my surgeon, after all. But every time I looked at his business card or received a follow-up call from his office, my heart would race. When I arrived for my consultation, his office was different from the sterile examination room where we'd first met. It was warm and personal, with framed medical degrees on the walls alongside photographs of what looked like hiking expeditions and mountain climbs. "James," he greeted me with that same warm smile, gesturing for me to sit. "How's the knee?" "Still painful," I admitted, "but the ice and elevation help." He nodded, pulling his chair closer to examine my knee. His fingers were cool against my skin as he tested the joint's mobility. Each touch sent shivers through me that had nothing to do with pain. "The swelling has gone down nicely," he said, his face close to mine as he helped me sit up. "We should be good to proceed with surgery next week." As he went through the surgical procedure in detail, I noticed things I'd missed in our first meeting: the faint stubble on his jaw, a small scar above his right eyebrow, the way he unconsciously bit his lower lip when concentrating. "I notice you like hiking," I said when he finished, nodding toward the photos. His face lit up. "Love it. There's something peaceful about being on a mountain trail. Do you hike sometimes? Though I might need to find less dangerous hobbies after this." I gestured to my knee. He laughed, and the sound made my stomach flip. "Well, once you're recovered, maybe I can recommend some good trails, ones that won't result in any more surgical consultations." Was he flirting? No. Surely he was just being friendly, professional. But there was something in the way his eyes lingered on mine that made me wonder. "I'd like that," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. The day of the surgery arrived faster than I expected. As I lay on the pre-op bed trying to calm my nerves, Chris appeared in his surgical scrubs. He looked different, more serious, but no less attractive. "Ready?" he asked, checking my chart. "As I'll ever be." I tried to joke, but my voice wavered. He must have noticed my anxiety because he placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You're in good hands, James, I promise." In the operating room, as the anesthesia began to take effect, the last thing I remember was Chris's blue eyes above his surgical mask and his voice saying, "Sweet dreams, James." When I woke in recovery, groggy and disoriented, he was there, checking my vitals. Through the haze of post-surgical medication, I thought I felt his hand brush through my hair, but I couldn't be sure if it was real or just a dream. "So surgery went perfectly," he said softly. "Rest now. I'll check on you later." The next few days in the hospital were a blur of pain medication, physical therapy evaluations, and regular visits from Chris. Each time he came to check on my progress, he stayed longer than necessary. Our conversations drifted from my recovery to more personal topics. I learned that he had grown up in Seattle, moved to Boston for medical school at Harvard, and decided to stay. He was divorced, a brief marriage right after residency that ended amicably when they realized they wanted different things. He lived alone with his golden retriever, Max, and spent his free time either hiking or reading medical journals. Though lately, he admitted during one evening checkup, "I've been more interested in financial markets." He gave me a meaningful look that made my heart race. On the day of my discharge, he came to my room with the paperwork. "I've scheduled your follow-up appointment for next week," he said, handing me the form. "But if you need anything before then—"
Paused, then pulled out his card, different from the official hospital one he'd given me. "This is my personal number. Anytime." Our fingers brushed as I took the card, and neither of us pulled away immediately. The moment stretched between us, charged with unspoken possibilities. "Thank you," I managed to say, "for everything." "Just doing my job," he replied softly, but his eyes said something else entirely. The week at home was challenging. Physical therapy exercises were painful, and I struggled with basic tasks. But what really kept me awake at night was thoughts of Chris. I must have picked up his card 100 times, wanting to call or text, but always talking myself out of it. Then, 3 days before my scheduled follow-up, I had a particularly rough physical therapy session that left my knee throbbing despite the pain medication. Without letting myself overthink it, I sent him a text. "Dr. Bennett, having more pain than usual after PT today. Normal?" His response came within minutes. "Call me, Chris. And yes, normal, as you increase activity, but I'd like to check it. Can you come in tomorrow instead of waiting for your scheduled appointment?" The next morning I found myself back in his office. He examined my knee carefully, his touch professional but somehow more intimate than before. "The pain is from overworking the muscles," he explained. "We need to adjust your PT schedule." He was still holding my leg, his thumb absently stroking my skin. "Have you been eating properly? Getting enough rest?" "Trying to," I said. "It's a bit difficult managing alone." He looked up at me, concern evident in his blue eyes. "No family nearby?" "No, they're all back in Chicago, and my friends try to help, but they work during the day." He was quiet for a moment, still not moving his hands from my leg. "I could stop by after my rounds tomorrow, bring dinner, make sure you're doing your exercises correctly." My heart pounded. Isn't that above and beyond your duties as my surgeon? Probably, he admitted with a small smile, but I'm worried about you, as your doctor, of course. Of course, I echoed, trying to ignore the hope building in my chest. Then yes, that would be helpful. The next evening, my doorbell rang precisely at 7 p.m. Chris stood there in casual clothes, jeans and a navy sweater that made his eyes look even bluer, holding bags of takeout from an upscale Italian restaurant. "I remembered you mentioning you loved Italian food," he said, stepping inside. He looked different outside the hospital setting, more relaxed, yet somehow more nervous. We ate at my small dining table, talking about everything except my knee. He told me about his latest hiking adventure, and I shared stories about my time in Chicago. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by lingering glances and shared smiles. After dinner, he insisted on checking my knee exercises. "Show me your routine," he said, clearing space in my living room. I lay on the exercise mat, acutely aware of his presence as he watched me go through the movements. His hands occasionally guided my leg, adjusting the angle slightly. "Your form is good," he said softly, his hand resting on my calf longer than necessary. "But you're tensing here." His fingers moved to my thigh, demonstrating where I needed to relax. The touch sent electricity through my body. Our eyes met, and the professional pretense we'd been maintaining began to crumble. "Chris," I whispered, not sure what I was asking for. He pulled his hand back slowly. "I shouldn't." He started running a hand through his hair. "This is incredibly unprofessional of me." "What is?" I asked, sitting up to face him. "Being here. Wanting to be here. Thinking about you constantly since you first came into my ER." He stood up, pacing slightly. "You're my patient, Janes. There are ethical guidelines." I struggled to my feet, balancing carefully. "And after I'm no longer your patient?" He stopped pacing, turning to look at me. The intensity in his eyes took my breath away. "After you're no longer my patient, I would very much like to take you to dinner properly, not as your doctor." "How long until I'm officially recovered?" I asked, taking a small step toward him. 3 months post-surgery is typically when I sign off on a patient's recovery," he said, his voice rough. 2 months and 1 week to go. That's a long time, I murmured, now standing close enough to feel the heat from his body. "Janes," he breathed, and I could see his control wavering. "I should go." "You should," I agreed, not moving away for a moment. For a moment we stood there, the air heavy with possibility. Then, with visible effort, he stepped back. "I'll see you at your next appointment," he said, gathering his things at the door. At the door he turned back. 2 months and 1 week. After he left, I sat on my couch for a long time, replaying every moment of the evening. The way he looked at me, the feeling of his hands on my skin, the promise in his words. 2 months and 1 week suddenly felt like an eternity. The next few weeks were an exquisite form of torture. Our regular checkups became charged with unspoken tension. Chris maintained his professionalism, but his touches lingered. His eyes held mine longer than necessary, and sometimes I caught him watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. During one appointment, as he tested my knee's range of motion, his fingers brushed the sensitive skin behind my knee. I couldn't suppress a small gasp, and his eyes darted to mine. "Painful?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "No," I managed to say. "Not painful." He cleared his throat and quickly moved his hands away, but I saw the flush creeping up his neck. We started texting regularly, always beginning with legitimate medical questions, but inevitably drifting into personal conversation. Late one night, after a particularly long text exchange about our favorite books, he wrote, "1 month and 2 weeks left. Not that I'm counting." I smiled at my phone, typing back, "Definitely not counting." The physical therapy was progressing well, and I was getting stronger each day. Chris had recommended a particular therapist, David, who worked in the same hospital. Dr. Bennett talks about you a lot, David mentioned casually during one session. He's very invested in your recovery. I tried to keep my expression neutral. He's a dedicated doctor. David gave me a knowing look, but didn't comment further. One rainy afternoon, about a month before my projected release date as his patient, I was leaving the hospital after PT when I literally ran into Chris in the parking lot. My crutches slipped on the wet pavement, and he caught me before I could fall. "Careful," he said softly, his arms around my waist. We stayed like that for a moment too long, my back against his chest, his breath warm on my neck. "Thank you," I whispered, reluctantly straightening up. "Janes," he started, then stopped himself. "You shouldn't be driving in this weather. Let me give you a ride home." I knew I should decline, but instead found myself following him to his car, a sleek black Audi that somehow perfectly suited him. The drive was quiet, filled with the sound of rain and windshield wipers. At a red light, I caught him looking at me, his expression intense. "1 month," he said quietly. "And 5 days," I added. He smiled, but it was strained. "This is harder than I thought it would be. The waiting, being your patient, maintaining professional distance when all I want—" He trailed off as the light turned green. When we reached my apartment, he insisted on walking me to my door, holding an umbrella over both of us. In the narrow shelter of my doorway, we stood close. Too close for doctor and patient, not enough close for what we both wanted. "Thank you for the ride," I said, not moving to unlock.
Home, I knew I should decline, but instead found myself following him to his car, a sleek black Audi that somehow perfectly suited him. The drive was quiet, filled with the sound of rain and windshield wipers. At a red light, I caught him looking at me, his expression intense. "1 month," he said quietly. "In 5 days," I added. He smiled, but it was strained. "This is harder than I thought it would be. The waiting. Being your doctor, maintaining professional distance when all I—" He trailed off as the light turned green. When we reached my apartment, he insisted on walking me to my door, holding an umbrella over both of us. In the narrow shelter of my doorway, we stood close. Too close for doctor and patient, not close enough for what we both wanted. "Thank you for the ride," I said, not moving to unlock my door. "Alex," he said, my name almost a groan. "I should go." "You should," I agreed, just like that night weeks ago. This time, though, he didn't move away immediately. His free hand came up to my face, his thumb brushing my cheek so lightly I might have imagined it. Then he stepped back, turned, and walked away into the rain. The final month of my official recovery period felt endless. Every interaction with Chris became charged with anticipation and barely contained desire. We both knew we were drawing closer to the invisible line we'd set for ourselves, and it made every moment more intense. During my second-to-last scheduled appointment, Chris was checking my knee stability when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then smiled. "What is it?" I asked, curious about the expression on his face. "I just received an invitation to speak at a medical conference next month," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "In Chicago?" My heart skipped. "Chicago?" "Yes," he said meaningfully. "I was thinking of extending my stay for a few days. Perhaps you could show me around your hometown. By then, you'll officially be a former patient." The way he said former patient sent shivers down my spine. "I'd like that." 2 weeks later, at what was supposed to be my final checkup, Chris was unusually quiet as he examined my knee. His touch was clinical, but I could feel tension radiating from him. "Well," he said finally, stepping back and removing his latex gloves, "your recovery has exceeded expectations. The knee is stable, range of motion is excellent, and you're ready to return to normal activities." "So I'm officially discharged?" I asked, my heart racing. He walked to his desk and picked up a form. "Just need to sign this." He paused, pen hovering over the paper. "Once I sign, you're no longer my patient.
The air in the room felt electric. Slowly, deliberately, he signed his name and dated the form. Then he looked up at me, his blue eyes darker than I'd ever seen them. "Dinner tonight?" "Yes," I breathed. "I'll pick you up at 7. I spent hours getting ready that evening, changing my outfit multiple times before settling on a blue button-down shirt and dark jeans. At exactly 7, my doorbell rang. Chris stood there, in a charcoal gray suit that fit him perfectly, holding a bouquet of white roses. "These are for you," he said, his voice soft. "I've been wanting to bring you flowers since that first day in the ER." I took the flowers, our fingers brushing. "They're beautiful. Come in while I put them in water." He followed me to the kitchen, watching as I arranged the roses in a vase. When I turned around, he was much closer than I expected. "Alex," he said, reaching out to touch my face. "I've been waiting so long to do this." Then he was kissing me, and everything else fell away. His lips were soft but insistent, his hands cupping my face as if I was something precious. I gripped his suit jacket, pulling him closer, pouring months of longing into the kiss. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing heavily. Chris rested his forehead against mine, his thumb stroking my cheeks. "We should go to dinner," he murmured, though he made no move to step away. "We should," I agreed, sliding my hands up to his neck instead. He kissed me again, deeper this time, backing me gently against the counter. My hands moved into his hair as his slid down to my waist, pulling our bodies flush together. "Maybe we should order in," Chris suggested between kisses, his voice rough. I laughed against his lips. "What happened to our proper first date?" "We've essentially been dating for months," he said, pulling back just enough to look at me. "Every conversation, every text, every moment I spent thinking about you, instead of focusing on my other patients." "Very unprofessional, Dr. Bennett,"